And good morning, and am I ever excited? I'm here with Nora Chahbaz. I knew I would mispronounce your name. I'm sorry. With Nora, head of EBLI. And I'll tell you what, folks, I've been out there a lot, and I've been hearing about all these people that say, oh, we've got this and we've got that, blasey, blasey. Nora's the only one with actual data that shows that she actually improves comprehension. Okay, so the kudos to you on that, and I'm sure we're going to hear more about that. Uh, Folks, I'm going to highly recommend that when you, I'm going to stop talking in a minute, but I'm going to highly recommend that you visit Nora's site. Uh, Here's what it looks like. So be sure to visit this. You'll be happy you did. There are so many resources for educators, for parents. You could spend a day on the site, but don't. Okay, but there are just so many good things. And by the way, Nora, I'll put a plug in for your um, uh, apps. That little sight word app you have is like to die for, and that isn't the only thing you have there. So that all said, and you can tell I'm a big fan. Um, uh, I think we'll find out if Nora considers herself science of reading or not. But of the science of reading crowd, she's someone that will talk to people that doesn't get on the hey, I'm right, you're wrong bandwagon. She talks, and I love that about her. And now I'm going to shut up and let Nora tell you all about herself, and then we have some questions for her. So, Nora, it's all you.
All right, thank you, Sam. Yes, and that website is ebli.com, EBLI.com. You can
There'll
find
be
out.
a link to it, I promise you.
Oh, perfect. Okay, so I'm Nora Chahbaz. I'm the founder of EBLI, which stands for Evidence-Based Literacy Instruction, and it's a comprehensive system that's based on research of teacher training and student lessons, with the goal of helping educators get all of their students to their highest potential in not just reading, but also writing and spelling. And I'm real happy to be here.
Okay, and I'm on the next thing, getting into questions now, and I'm going to do a little switch on this screen here for a second. Um, there we go. So, getting into the first set of questions, and I'm just going to give them to you in uh, a little group here.
Okay.
What do you think science of reading means? How how has science or research informed your teaching at EBLI? And tell me about your explicit instruction and how you gradually release students to independent reading and writing. That's the first block of questions. It's all yours.
Okay, very good. To me, science of reading, I used to be a nurse, a neonatal intensive care nurse, so I'm a big science person. I worked in Charleston, South Carolina at a research center. And so what the science meant is that there's research and you have a protocol that you follow, and the research is typically done by scientists and carried out by doctors and nurses in our center. And the same I see with the science of reading. To me, looks at different disciplines that have done research. I love the brain imaging research. I've always been interested in the brain because of my NICU experience, but they have done research from different disciplines to look at what is absolutely necessary to teach anyone to read to their highest potential, and what can you cut out. Kind of like looking at what is the pure sirloin without all the fat and grizzle and all that type of stuff. Take out the fluff, teach what you need so you can get kids to read, write, and spell accurately and automatically as quickly as possible, moving them into trade books, moving them into doing independent writing, gradually releasing them to that. So let's see, what was that next question?
How does it
How is
inform? Yeah.
EBLI researched and informed? Again, I used to be a nurse, and I came to literacy because of my own child's reading difficulties back in 1997. And so I began researching and reading everything that I could find. Now, interestingly, my daughter first was taught traditional phonics in this great little school in Guam, where my older daughter did beautiful with the traditional phonics and all the rules and everything. And my second one did not. Then we came back to the States, and she was taught a whole language approach in the school that she came to here. She was phenomenal at math, and she was a year below grade level in reading in second grade. She was at the 98th percentile in math. And so I was researching, and everything I found was either traditional phonics or whole language, which it was called at that time. And I'm like, well, she's go ahead, both of those. And some of these things don't make sense. And so I found out about something that I call linguistic phonics or speech first decoding. It was Diane McGinnis's book, Why Our Children Can't Read. But everything that got me to that point was looking at what does the research say? What is the research? Not only because research can pretty much say anything. So not only is research supporting this, but where's that transition to teaching it to kids at our reading center, but ideally in a classroom. So what does it, you can say something works when you're doing it with research, but if you can't have the basic educator or whoever translate that to practice in the classroom where it really works and you close the gap and have great gains, then I wasn't interested in that. So we don't have anything in EBLI that isn't supported with what the research tells us and has that bridge to application and the replication with students. So everything in EBLI that we do has a purpose. Every single step of every single activity that we teach kids has a purpose. There's no fluff, zero. If you want to add fluff, you can add fluff. We don't give you any fluff. So that's really important. And we teach explicitly the 5 essential components of reading. We teach phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, vocabulary, and comprehension, as well as handwriting, spelling, and writing. So that's the comprehensive piece, and it's done intertwined. We don't like teach phonemic awareness over here and vocabulary over there and comprehension there. Very intertwined. Every activity in EBLI in every lesson has many of those 8 components included in it, which greatly accelerates the instruction and greatly closes the gap. The efficiency, the effectiveness of the instruction is highly improved with what we do with EBLI. Let's see.
Okay, and I know that Tim Rosinski and I were very impressed with what we saw when we came to visit, and you welcomed us with open arms, and thank you for that. I'm going to jump into now. Is this intervention done whole class? Is it used for intervention remediation? How much? And this is the biggie, and this is where folks get your little ears perked up, because how long does it take you to do this? We've got some folks out there that think, oh, well, we need years and years and years and years, and somehow I don't think that's what you think. But I'll let you talk. Okay, go ahead.
Yes. When I first started teaching with Diane McGinnis's information in her book, Why Our Children Can't Read, then I got the book Reading Reflex. And I used that to teach my daughter. And after 3 hours of instruction, she read a chapter book. Now, this is a child that could read anything that she'd memorized. In class, the whole story in their Basel series, if she'd memorized it, she could read it looking at the ceiling. But she could not read those words if you pulled them out or sentences. And she could not read any unfamiliar text. So I did the Reading Reflex. I used it with a bunch of friends' kids, and then I became trained in a program called phonographics. It was very one-on-one focused. I am so appreciative of them because it gave me my foundation, but it was clunky. I wanted classroom teachers to have this information. I wanted classroom teachers to help them be able to move their kids far and fast. So I was a phonographics trainer for 4 years, and then I created EBLI. And the reason I created EBLI is because I know, and we know from experience, and especially now 5 years later, that if we put the fence at the top of the cliff and we teach these kids right out of the gate from kindergarten, and we give them the instruction that they need so that they have that foundational instruction, we build the house quick so they can live in the house instead of teaching them to read for years and years and years, that we're going to move our kids far and fast. We'll have the comprehension, we'll have the higher level thinking, they'll be able to communicate through writing. So whole class, ideally to me, in my perfect world, is where EBLI will be taught. I would say 80%, 75 to 80% of the educators that we train are whole class K-3 teachers. We also train remediation. EBLI is spectacular for remediation. So K-12 remediation. The classroom teachers do reading in small groups, of course. They do explicit instruction quickly, and then they do reading in small group. Our intervention teachers can do small group or one-on-one. And EBLI works for all of those. And how EBLI works is it moves from your speech first. Kids come to us, whether it's in intervention or emerging readers, knowing how to speak. So we go from speech first, which is very different than what traditional phonics does. They start back behind the gate. We start 2/3 around the track because we go from what they already know, which is being able to talk and speak in words and sentences. So it does whole class, small group, and one-on-one. Now, interestingly, when I read Diane McGinnis's book, she talked about research that they had done 87 students, I believe it was, back in 1996. It was published in the Orton Annal of Dyslexia, as a matter of fact. And in 12 hours, they remediated kids who were struggling readers, low literacy, in 12 hours of instruction to at or above grade level. And some of them were less than 12 hours. And I thought, okay, I hadn't taught any reading before that, so that sounded good to me. And at my reading center, it's actually a little less than 10 hours on average. We get kids literally from all over the world. We have a client that's coming to us from Australia. He does Zoom at 10 o'clock at night because that's the only time that it works when we're awake over here. But so that with remediation, these are kids that sometimes have been in years of some sort, of Title I or Orton Gillingham or phonics instruction or whatever it may be, all kind, different. It could be reading recovery. It could be, whatever they're doing in Title I. So they've had years and years, and in 12 hours or less, we move them far and fast. They can go back in the classroom and really do the work that they need to do. Now, it's interesting because especially phonics focused people get really triggered by that number, unfortunately, and say that's absolutely not possible. And I've said to one, I said, that's interesting that you tell us that that's not possible, because we have like 771 of our clients we followed for a couple of years at a reading center, kindergarten through adults. And we have kindergarten, first grade, second grade. We have a graph for each of them showing them up at or above grade level on average for all of those kids in 9.7 hours, I think, of instruction. So it's kind of like telling NASA, you know what, you cannot fly to the moon. That doesn't make sense. You can't do that, even though they've already done it. And we're not the only ones that have done it. Phonograph, a lot of people actually have done it. Marnie Ginsburg with Reading Simplified. There's a lot of places that have done this instruction when it's from speech first decoding. So
okay, and I want to interject here about speech first decoding, because I know we don't have enough time
yeah.
for you to really explain that. But I do have links in my blog. So what I'm hoping is, I know you shared with me a really wonderful blog around that. And I'm hoping to talk you into letting me use that in Missouri.
Oh, please do.
As well.
Yeah, and
Okay.
you do the webinar too. The webinar ended up being 2 hours, and then I did another hour of answering questions, because it was, so we had about 300,000 or 3,000 people from around the world were signed up for that webinar. So
okay, so I want to promise my readers that when they read, this is seen on YouTube, but YouTube people, you've got to go back and look at the blog, because that's where I will give you the links that I know Nora is going to give me to these things.
yeah.
So
Yep.
this is going to be like, these are the links I promise you, and that's what it's going to
Yeah.
say. It's
You
going to
can
really
dig
say
deep
that
if
in
you
the
want.
blog.
Yeah.
So, and I'm going to have Laura guide me on what to do. I know I want your blog, and I know I want that blog that you were willing to share with Missouri Reader, and then maybe some other things, and of course links to the book. So I needed to say that so that
Okay, so we both
listeners
remember.
will know. Yeah, so that the listeners will know that's going to be in the blog. Okay, it'll be there. Okay, I'll be quiet now and get to the last thing here. Actually, you've kind of gotten to the question of how it can go so quickly, and speech first decoding.
Mhm.
So the final thing before we talk about the documentary is comprehension, because that's another place where everybody in the world who has phonics programs or decoding, better to use the word decoding, has decoding programs, claims to get gains in decoding, but you're one of the only ones I've ever found that gets gains in the decoding as well as gains in comprehension. How on earth do you do that?
Yeah.
Please
Well,
quickly
the
tell us about
bottom
it.
line, well, there's two things. We do that by doing very accelerated decoding instructions so that you can move, and we move into text immediately, even with little kids. And when you're middle of first grade, definitely second grade or older, we move into trade books. We don't do decodable text. We don't do level readers. We do real books. We like Chicken Soup for the Kids, so there's no pictures. Our littler kids will do Dr. Seuss or Henry and Mudge, those kinds of books. So we teach explicitly, and then we immediately apply it. We also apply it to writing and spelling. So all of those things intertwine with teaching, teaching the kids what they need to have. So with the comprehension, how we feel about reading is it's kind of like, I live in mid-Michigan near Flint and Detroit and all of that, with big automotive industry. We build a lot of cars around here. Now we don't build cars and we have the engine and it's over in one corner of the, the factory, okay, and then the rest of the car is over here. The engine has to be part of the car, but we don't want to spend a year, 2 years, 4 years, 7 years, 10 years building the engine and never putting it in the car, because then it's not going to be any worth, right? Even if it's I think a Hemi's an engine, but even if it's the best engine in the world, it's not going to work if you don't use it to where it's connected to the other stuff. Same with building a house. We don't just build the foundation and the walls for years and years. We get it done for the job of living in the house. That's the reason. We build the engine in the car for the job of driving the car. We teach somebody to read so that they actually can read and comprehend and also write. So our goal is always, everything that we do, every step of all those activities that I talked about is with a mindset of comprehension. That's where we're going, and we're going there fast. We're not going there someday or some year. We're going there fast, because then when you are taught the way we teach, self-teaching happens very quickly. And you can get into text so that you can actually increase your background knowledge, so that you can have that joy of reading, all of those great important things. The only point of teaching reading is so that you can understand what you read and pick up anything you want, not only the things that somebody says that you can read, but anything that you want to read so that you can pick it up and be able to do like I do, which I've always been a great reader, and I love to read, and I love to just learn about everything, and also just take me away so I'm in the story. So comprehension is king. That's what we want.
Okay, and that really, boy, beautifully said. And that is the perfect segue into the final question. And I'm going to, full disclosure, you arranged for me to be in this documentary you're about to talk about. I have no idea why, but uh, tell us about the upcoming documentary, and then after the documentary, you've got a wide open. Boy, Sam, you didn't ask me this, and I wish you had or you had. So the documentary, and then any last thoughts. Okay, so here we go.
Okay, the documentary is called The Truth About Reading, The Invisible Crisis Hiding in Plain Sight. And this was born basically because John Corcoran, the author of The Teacher Who Couldn't Read, great book, link that too, Sam, and I had gone to a Jack Canfield retreat, and John had wanted a motion picture movie on his story, The Teacher Who Couldn't Read. And Jack said, I think you should do a documentary and educate people about what's going on with literacy in our country. And we're like, all right. He's like, and I've got the perfect director for you. So he connected us with a documentary director who said, yes, I would like. At first he's like, well, this isn't a big enough story with John's story. And we said, oh, let's tell you the big story. And so he said, all right. I don't think he had any idea what he was getting into, but to be fair, we didn't have any idea what we were getting into either. And so he said, there's two things. You need to get the people who are going to be in it and educate us. And you're going to do the funding, raising, which John and I have never done any such thing. And he said, nobody that's in the documentary can be a funder. And we're going to keep this pure, and we're going to look at all sides. This is what we're going to do. And this was the really big, interesting thing that now is like, okay, because all the interviews are done. But he said, you will have zero input as what's going to go in this film. I'm going to do these interviews. Our team and our film company, we're going to decide what's going to be in this film. So we said, okay. And so since that was, a year and a half ago, November of 2019, I think it was 2020, November 2020. And so we have since interviewed, or Nick has interviewed 60 to 80, I don't know how many exactly are on that list, people from all walks of literacy, from parents to researchers to administrators to kids to illiterate or previously illiterate or subliterate adults, to people in the science reading camp and people in the balanced literacy camp, which that's where Sam came in. I had a hard time getting people from the balanced literacy camp. They thought we were trying to trick them or something, but I did get a couple. You and I think it's Paul Thomas is his name. And to get really out there, like what's going on, and how about this? This is kind of my extra answer, I think, Sam, but how can we work together for the goal that we all really want? This makes me want to cry, which is for these kids to be able to be accurate and automatic readers and spellers, so they don't have to think about it like you and I don't have to think about it, that they can just do it. And their life is not impacted because they can't do it. And their anxiety and that trauma and all of that no longer happens. I'm sick of all of people bickering and infighting and doing all of that. It's ridiculous. This is not about the adults. It's about the children. And nobody that I know says, hey, let's get up in the morning and see if we can ruin some kids, right? but there's a lot of kids that need a lot of help, and we have to admit that we don't know anything. Sam doesn't know, or we not know anything. We don't know everything. Sam doesn't know everything. I don't know everything. You don't know everything. Nobody knows everything. And if we don't have 95 to 100% of our kids that we're teaching proficient at reading, we have an obligation to continue to learn more. And there's always more to learn. I just did this that Sam was talking about, the speech to print versus print to speech webinar a couple weeks ago. And I probably put 80 hours of time into researching it over 2 weeks, something I thought I knew. And the terms have changed, all kinds of things have changed. And I went down lots of rabbit holes to make sure that everything I said, I could totally back up, because I also don't like this stuff where we're just making stuff up and throwing it out there as if it's so. So we can work together. All of us can work together. Why don't we do that? We can have grace with each other. We've all made mistakes. If you haven't made mistakes, you're not alive, right? We've all done our best with what we have, and we all can do better. And so that's really I did my end part too, Sam.
Yeah, and perfectly, and we're on the same page about that. And by the way, there are things I disagree with you on, and there are things that you disagree with me on, but we still talk to each other and we smile
Yep.
and everything.
Let
And
us be human. Yes.
yeah, and the big thing out there, and this has been my mantra now for a while, if there's ever going to be a finding of common ground, the only possible way that can happen is if everyone's willing to admit that whatever their favorite thing is doesn't always work all the time. And they've got to be willing to look at other things as well. And I'll give you the final, well, there's a silly ending that I do at all my vlogs,
Okay.
all these things, and you're going to find out about in just a second. But before I do that, we need to be able to find that common ground. And I think we can if we're just willing to admit we don't know everything, but collectively we might.
For sure. I love that.
If we
collectively, we might, maybe that could be the name of this. I think too, if we can be civil to each other, you and I can be civil to each other. You say, just like we had this discussion before we came on. Well, this is this, and having this discussion about, give me where you're coming from that, where you got that. And you're asking me the same things. That's how we learn and grow, right? And also, I think that there's a favorite thing. Steve Dykstra says this. It's every one of us are prone to looking at the things that we are not doing or that we disagree with a much more critical eye than we're willing to look at the things that we do ourselves. We're not willing to be critical or even use the same lens to look at what we're doing. And we really need to do that. We all need to be humble and open and understanding that this is not about us. This is about the kids that we're all trying to help. So let's do it.
Okay, and it is about the kids. Now here comes the silliness. I always end my blog with a Zoom wave. So we now have to do together a Zoom wave goodbye. So let's give me a wave.
Yeah.
Bye, everybody, and thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Lots to unpack here.